Fire Captain Engineering, situation critical.
All available personnel on the double. Spock with me.
Picture this. It's 1966. America is locked in a Cold War, its cities are burning with civil unrest, and its television sets are filled with westerns, variety shows, and safe, comfortable entertainment designed to avoid controversy at all costs. Into that landscape walked a low-budget science fiction series about a starship crew boldly going where no man had gone before, and almost nobody watched it. Star Trek, the original series, ran for just 3 seasons. It never cracked the top 30 in ratings. Its sets wobbled, its budgets were laughable, and the network that aired it couldn't wait to pull the plug. By every measurable standard of its era, it was a disappointment. And yet, here we are, nearly 6 decades later, still talking about it. Still making movies and spin-off series from it. Still quoting it. Still studying it in university courses on media, culture, and ethics. Star Trek didn't just survive its own cancellation. It became one of the most consequential pieces of popular storytelling in human history. But the story behind how it got made, the arguments, the accidents, the near disasters, and the strange decisions that shaped it, is almost as fascinating as the show itself. So let's pull back the curtain. Here are 20 weird facts about Star Trek 1966 that you almost certainly didn't know. When Gene Roddenberry submitted his original pilot to NBC in 1965, the ship's first officer, second in command of the entire Enterprise, was a woman. Her name was Number 1, and she was played by actress Majel Barrett. She was cold, composed, brilliant, and completely in control. She was also, as far as NBC's executives were concerned, a problem. The network flatly rejected the concept. Audiences, they argued, simply wouldn't accept a woman in a position of authority over men. It was too progressive, too strange, and too likely to alienate viewers. Roddenberry was forced to remove the character entirely when he retooled the pilot. The irony. Majel Barrett didn't disappear. Roddenberry quietly recast her as Nurse Christine Chapel, a less threatening role, but one that kept her on the ship. The two later married. And decades later, the same franchise that was forced to demote its female first officer would produce a series led entirely by a woman. The wheel turns slowly, but it turns. Before William Shatner ever set foot on the bridge of the Enterprise, there was Jeffrey Hunter. Hunter was a legitimate Hollywood star, handsome, serious, and already famous for playing Jesus Christ in the 1961 film King of Kings. He played Captain Christopher Pike in the original pilot, and his interpretation of the character was quiet, reflective, and almost melancholy. A man weighed down by the burden of command. It was a thoughtful, nuanced performance. NBC didn't want thoughtful and nuanced. They wanted action. Hunter departed. The exact reasons have never been entirely clear, with accounts ranging from personal choice to pressure from his wife to simple disinterest in television work. Shatner came in, and with him came an entirely different energy. Bolder. More theatrical. More willing to leap before looking. The show's personality changed overnight. Jeffrey Hunter died in 1969 at just 42 years old, never knowing the cultural earthquake the show would eventually trigger. The Spock that audiences fell in love with, the pointed ears, the arched eyebrow, the serene alien composure, almost looked radically different. Roddenberry's earliest concept for the character described reddish skin, something unsettling and otherworldly, designed to signal that this was a being from another world entirely. The problem was technical. In 1966, a substantial portion of American households still owned black and white televisions. Red skin, when rendered in monochrome, would photograph dark, very dark, in ways that carried visual associations the show's creators were not intending. The red skin concept was quietly shelved, replaced with a faint greenish-yellow tint subtle enough to suggest alienness without creating the wrong impression on black and white sets. When the show aired in color, most viewers couldn't even detect the tint. It hardly mattered. The ears did the heavy lifting, and they became one of the most recognizable silhouettes in the history of entertainment. The transporter beam, the sparkling dematerialization effect that allowed the crew to vanish from the ship and reappear on a planet's surface, is one of the most iconic pieces of science fiction technology ever conceived. Physicists have written papers about whether it could theoretically work. Scientists run experiments inspired by its principles. It has entered the cultural vocabulary as shorthand for instantaneous travel. It was invented because the production couldn't afford shuttlecraft. The original plan called for the crew to travel to planetary surfaces via small shuttle vehicles, an approach that would have required elaborate model work, complex set construction, and significant screen time. The budget made it impossible. Someone on the production team proposed an alternative, a visual effect suggesting that matter could be broken down and transmitted like a signal. The effect itself was created by filming glittering dust particles falling in front of a black backdrop and then running the footage in reverse. The cost was negligible. The impact on science fiction was incalculable. Most television pilots, when rejected by a network, vanish forever. The footage goes into a vault, the sets get dismantled, and everyone moves on. NBC did something almost unheard of when they passed on Star Trek's original pilot in 1965. They commissioned a second one. Their objections were detailed. The show was too slow, too intellectual, too focused on ideas at the expense of action. The female first officer was unacceptable. The alien crew member looked like a devil. Roddenberry went back to the drawing board, kept Spock, replaced virtually everything else, and delivered a livelier, more action-oriented second pilot that the network accepted. But Roddenberry didn't waste the footage from the rejected first pilot. He cannibalized it cleverly, weaving it into a two-part episode called The Menagerie, the only Star Trek episode ever to win a Hugo Award. The story the network thought was too cerebral became award-winning television. By the end of Star Trek's first season, Nichelle Nichols had made up her mind. She was leaving. Broadway was calling. The opportunities felt more substantial, and despite the historical significance of her role as Lieutenant Uhura, she handed in her resignation to Gene Roddenberry. Then she attended an NAACP fundraiser and was told that someone wanted to meet her. That someone was Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. King told her, with complete seriousness, that Star Trek was the only show he allowed his children to stay up to watch. He described Uhura not as a television character but as a symbol, proof, visible every week in American living rooms, that a black woman could hold a position of authority, dignity, and competence in the highest reaches of human achievement. He asked her to reconsider. She withdrew her resignation the following day. One conversation, at one event, preserved one of the most important roles in the history of American television. It's almost impossible today to imagine anyone other than Leonard Nimoy playing Spock. The character and the actor seem permanently fused. But in the early days of production, Nimoy was deeply uncertain about whether he wanted any part of it. His concerns were specific and practical. The pointed ears and alien makeup, he worried, would reduce him to a novelty, a creature rather than a character. He feared the kind of typecasting that could close doors for a serious actor. He also struggled with the emotional demands of the role in a way that surprised him. Nimoy was trained in expressive, emotionally alive performance. Playing a being who had systematically suppressed all emotional response required him to undo his instincts, not employ them. What changed his mind was the audience's reaction. Viewers didn't see a monster. They saw something richer and stranger, a being whose suppressed emotions were somehow more affecting than emotions freely expressed. Nimoy eventually wrote 2 autobiographies. The first was titled I Am Not Spock. The second, written years later, was titled I Am Spock. The distance between those 2 titles is the whole story. In November 1968, Captain Kirk and Lieutenant Uhura shared a kiss on screen. It was not the first interracial kiss in American film history, but it was among the most widely seen, and it aired on network primetime television at a moment when interracial relationships were still illegal in several American states. NBC's response was to try to defuse it. They insisted the scene be written so that the kiss was involuntary, forced upon the characters by the telekinetic power of alien captors. This gave affiliates in southern states a degree of cover. It wasn't a real kiss, it was alien compulsion. What the network didn't anticipate was the actors' response. Shatner and Nichols deliberately ruined every take in which they kept their faces apart, making them unusable. The only clean footage available was the take in which they turned toward each other. The network had its disclaimer. The actors had their moment. Nichols later described receiving a letter from a white Southern man who said that moment had caused him to genuinely question his own beliefs. Science fiction as moral persuasion, delivered through a loophole. After the first season, NBC began making noise about cancellation. The ratings hadn't justified the cost. After the second season, the situation was more serious. What happened next had no real precedent in television history. Fans organized. Without the internet, without social media, without any of the digital infrastructure that makes modern fan campaigns possible, they flooded NBC's offices with correspondence. Estimates range upward of 1 million pieces of mail across the two campaigns. They circulated petitions on university campuses. They marched outside NBC's New York headquarters. They lobbied, argued, and refused to accept the inevitable. The network relented, twice. It even made a public announcement at a fan convention, one of the earliest examples of a network directly acknowledging its audience's power. The third season that resulted was weak, underfunded, badly scheduled, and creatively uneven. But it gave the show enough episodes to qualify for syndication. And syndication changed everything. Beam me up, Scotty. It's on T-shirts. It's been quoted by presidents and astronauts. When James Doohan, the actor who played Montgomery Scott, passed away in 2005, crew members aboard the International Space Station used the phrase as a tribute. It is perhaps the single most quoted line associated with the show. It does not appear anywhere in the original series. Not in any episode. Not in any form. What Kirk actually says, across various episodes, includes, "Beam us up, Scotty, Scotty, beam me up," and simply, "Enterprise, beam me up." The precise combination of words that became the cultural touchstone was never spoken by anyone. This phenomenon, where collective memory invents a quote and then attributes it to a source that never contained it, is more common than most people realize. Casablanca's "Play it again, Sam" was never said. Sherlock Holmes never said "Elementary, my dear Watson" in Arthur Conan Doyle's original stories. But the Star Trek case is particularly striking because the invented phrase became more famous than any line the show actually contained. Every week, the Enterprise crew encountered alien civilizations wearing exotic, elaborate, otherworldly clothing. The wardrobe department was creative, but it was also, out of necessity, extremely resourceful. Much of what appeared on screen as alien fashion was sourced directly from the studio's existing costume warehouses. Hollywood studios in the 1960s maintained vast archives, decades of accumulated wardrobe from films and television series that could be repurposed cheaply. Star Trek's costume team mined these archives constantly. Roman togas became alien ceremonial wear. Frontier-era Western costumes became the dress of distant civilizations. Old science fiction B-movie suits got new paint, new insignia, and new accessories. Attentive viewers occasionally spotted familiar pieces, a robe that had appeared in a biblical epic now draped across the shoulders of a being from another galaxy. The costume team's real skill wasn't fabrication. It was transformation. The phaser, Starfleet's standard sidearm, capable of stun, heat, or complete molecular disintegration, is one of the most iconic prop weapons in cinema and television history. Its origins are considerably less glamorous. The prop department began with plastic ray gun props already sitting in the studio's inventory, novelty items and low-budget props left over from earlier productions. These were modified, new paint, new details, additional components to suggest sophistication. The results had a slightly toy-like quality that eagle-eyed viewers noticed even at the time. The plastic looked cheap under close inspection, and the proportions weren't quite right for a serious weapon. Under studio lighting, with the right sound effects layered on in post-production,